Welcome back all of you. So, in the previous lecture we studied about environmental management and environmental management system. In today's lecture we will study about ISO 14000 series, ISO 14001 specifically, which is a very broadly used environmental management system. Then the certification, how to obtain this ISO 14000 certification and which are the agencies which certify it and how it is accredited. Then with some examples. So, ISO 14000, this label ISO 14001 is specific to environmental management system, and you would see this nowadays on most of the big companies or corporates. Whenever you look at the logos or the web pages of, let us say, Tata Power, Reliance, Adani, you would see this ISO 14001 certified. 10 years back ISO 9001 certified, which is related to like say quality, was very popular. But since the time climate change has become very important and environmental management has become a very important issue in corporate and business sector, ISO 14001 has gained a huge momentum. So, 14000, it is a family of international standards which are designed basically to help organizations to be more environmentally responsible. So, any organization, whether it is a private sector, public sector, manufacturing or service sector, they make use of lot of natural resources, and most of their activities or aspects, as we studied previously, are going to have impact on the environment. So, to minimize those impact or to reduce those impact and to take measures towards that direction, this standard helps. So, these standards were developed by ISO, that is the International Organization for Standardization, in 1996. So, in 1996 this ISO 14000 series came into existence, and it provided the guidelines and requirements for EMS. So, the objective is simple: to minimize negative impacts on the environment, to comply with environmental laws, and continuous improvement of the performance of organizations. So, that continuous improvement is the core of any environmental management system, because laws, compliances, the limits on the emissions, waste discharge, they are going to change and evolve with time. Depending on the population, depending on the current climate situation, the policies and compliances are going to change. So, the response of organization towards reducing those negative impacts on environment need to be updated timely. So, that continuous improvement of performance is also a part of the objectives of ISO 14000 series. So, what are the benefits of ISO 14000? Like, why should companies go and apply for these standards? So, there are several benefits. One is like satisfy the investor criteria. I would summarize it like this: obviously, it helps improve the environmental performance, and because of that it helps to increase or enhance public image and reputation of that company. So, it is good for different stakeholders, not just customers, but also the employees of the organization and the investors who are putting money in that organization. If they are environmentally responsible, it creates a good reputation in the market. It satisfies the investor criteria. It reduces the consumption of resources. So, material and energy, these are the two major resources which are consumed in almost any kind of organization. So, to reduce that consumption would also contribute towards environmental performance. Then it facilitates a legal framework for organization. So, if we have this ISO certification, there exists a proper system in the company which is responsible for looking after all the issues related to the environment. They would be responsible for measuring the emissions, for identifying the aspects that would have the impact on environment. They would be responsible for measuring the impact and then suggesting remedies to reduce that impact. Then another one is enhanced recycling and waste management. So, in addition to these benefits, there are several others, like say lower distribution cost, liability reduction and risk reduction, then obtain insurance at reasonable cost. Just like medical insurance nowadays, like when you apply for a LIC or health insurance, there is a medical check which is performed by the medical experts before making a decision whether to give insurance at a higher cost or at a lower cost. So, similarly, the company is having these kind of certifications. When they apply for environmental clearance for any project related to a new project, a new site or an extension of the existing facility, it would be easier for them to get that environmental clearance. So, those are the benefits of ISO 14000. And for whom this ISO 14000 is applicable? I would say it is applicable to almost any kind of organization, whether it is a large scale or a small scale business or industry, whether it is a service sector like hospitals, hotels, consultancy, whether it is a trading and retail sectors or government organizations of any size anywhere in the world. So, because like I said, mass and energy or material and energy is being consumed by almost every organization. It does not matter like what is the size of that organization, whether it is public or private, whether it is in the manufacturing or service or retailing or distribution. It involves a lot of transportation, consumption of energy through fuels, consumption of materials through different resources obtained from the nature. So, they are going to have environmental impact, and to manage them it is preferred option to have this ISO 14000 standards. So, it is applicable to almost all the organizations of all the sectors. So, if you look at the ISO 14000 family, 14001 obviously it is the environmental management system, and it was launched in like finalized in 2015, which is mainly for improving the environmental performance with the help of all the standards which exist in its family. Then we have 14004 and 5 also associated with environmental management system, but 14004 provides general guidelines on how to implement that 14001 standard, and 14005 it just gives a flexible approach to phase wise implementation of environmental management system. So, other than these three standards which are related directly to EMS, there is a whole lot of series in 14000 which are related to different aspects of the environments. It may be environmental audits, environmental labeling or life cycle assessment. Environmental audits, again there is a different standard for guidelines, a different standard for methodology, a different standard for how to qualify as an auditor and how to conduct those audit processes, though they have three standards like 13, 14, 15. In terms of environmental labeling, most of the companies can self declare their labels for the products or the equipment that they want to sell in the market. So, self declared labels they have 14021 to 23, then third party labels and environmental product declarations. So, this comes under the category of 20 to 25. Life cycle assessment, we are going to talk about life cycle assessment in detail in subsequent lectures of this course. So, it is basically a tool to evaluate the environmental impact of any process, product or system throughout its life cycle. So, for that there are some principles and frameworks which are mentioned in one of the ISO standards, and then there is a list of requirement and guidelines that needs to be followed while conducting life cycle assessment. Those are mentioned in ISO 14044. So, these are like some of the major standards which are involved in ISO 14000 and are related with the environmental performance of a company. This ISO 14000 family standards, this was developed by Technical Committee 207 and its subcommittees. So, all the standards under ISO, not just 14000, are developed by different types of technical committees which are comprised of area experts from those specific field, and then there are several subcommittees under each technical committee and they together work on developing these standards. So, if you look at the history of ISO 14000 or 14001, though it was finalized in 1996, the first version came in 1996 for 14001, but the background work started like 4 years back in 1992 when the British standard 7750 was launched in 1992, and then at a declaration in Brazil on environment and development, this standard was finalized. Then in 1993 a committee was formed to develop this ISO 14000 framework, and while this committee was formed by ISO, in parallel the European Union, they had their own like say standard scheme like EMAS, European Eco Management and Audit Scheme. So, it is also a voluntary standard of European Union and a commonly used environmental management system just like ISO 14001. And then in 1996 the first version of this standard was published, and then it got updated in 2004 and 2015. So, the 2015 one was a sort of very sophisticated comprehensive document which has been widely applied, and most of the companies have applied for this certification of ISO 14001 2015. So, it does not mean that it cannot be revised further. It is possible that these standards with time may be revised further, and we have a newer edition or version of these standards in future. So, that was all about ISO 14000 series or a family of standards, like when was it established, what is the purpose, what is the benefit, and what are different types of standards which are included in ISO 14000. Now, specifically focusing on 14001, which is environmental management system. So, it is an internationally agreed standard that sets out the requirement for an environmental management system. And what does it do? It helps to systematically manage environments or environmental affairs of any organization, and it is based on PDCA cycle, like plan, do, check, act. The basis or the focus or emphasis is on continuous improvement of the system. It addresses immediate and long term impact of products, services and processes on the environment, and it is a tool to improve environmental performance. So, that is the overall generic comprehensive definition of ISO 14001 standard, which is most widely used EMS system or environmental management system. So, the key elements of ISO 14001, they include environmental policy. So, see, since it is a type of EMS, some of the key elements or the framework on which it is based is similar to that of the basic framework for EMS. So, in EMS also we saw that it is based on PDCA cycle, like plan, do, check, act cycle. So as ISO 14001. So, the 6 key elements are the environmental policy. So, policy is something which sets a direction where we want to go, or what is the future projection of the company, like what it want to achieve in terms of environmental performance. Then planning to achieve or to how to achieve the vision of mentioned in the policy, and how to execute the actions towards achieving the vision and mission mentioned in the policy. Then implementation, whatever we planned, we implement it, and then study and correction. So, during implementation we follow the policies, procedures and perform actions, and if there are any corrections required, those are done in this stage. Then whatever outcome is there, that is reviewed by the management. So, where we can say monitoring and auditing. So, that management review is like the 5th key element of ISO 14001, and after the review, if there is a scope for further improvement, we may suggest or recommend changes in the environmental policy. We may recommend some changes in the planning stage, because whatever happens or whatever is decided in the policy and planning stage would get implemented in the further like subsequent stage. So, that continuous improvement, it is mainly focused towards advancing policy and planning, because these 2 stages will take care of the subsequent stages, like whatever we planned, that only would be implemented or studied and corrected later. So, if you look at the ISO 14001 process approach, so it starts with whether we need this. When I say we, it is with respect to a company. So, if there is a EMS requirement in the company or not. So, you first understand whether there is a requirement, whether there is any standard mentioned for EMS for that particular company. So, for that what we will do? We will first identify all the hazards, risk, opportunities with respect to environment and list out them, and that will help us to understand whether this standard is required in the company or not. Then the current environmental management system. So, if there is a existing EMS or environment management system in a company, but it is not ISO certified. So, we examine the current system and check whether there is a need for further improvement or whether there is a need for further validation from an organization like ISO or not. Then plan, do, check, act framework. So, because it is based on PDCA cycle, so we apply that PDCA framework in the existing environmental management system and find out whether we should go for ISO certification or not. And if it is realized that there is a need for going or applying for ISO certification, then we develop and implement the system based on that certificate, like based on the ISO 14001 standard, and then we can get it verified from a certified auditor and apply for ISO 14001 certification. Okay. And once we apply for the certification, if it is granted with the new certification, then there will be discussion on how do we implement it, so that we reduce the harm and impact of our company's activities on the environment. So, that is the overall ISO 14001 process approach, where we start with whether we require that EMS or not, whether the current EMS is efficient or not, then PDCA framework to evaluate all the possibilities, like what can be done, whether we should apply for certification or not. When we apply for the certification through the certified auditor, and once it is granted, we like set on the journey to reduce the impact on the environment. So, ISO 14000 certification, what exactly is like certification? Okay. It is it's obviously like a certificate or a document which validates organization's EMS for managing possible impacts on environment, and it can be through a reduction of waste, a reduction like optimization of energy use, and reduction of emissions. So, different components of environment, those are accounted into it, and then it demonstrates a company's commitment to regulatory compliance and continuous environmental performance improvement. So, those are the need for which ISO certification is required, and then there are further more benefits. For example, like obviously the compliance, there will be the involvement of leadership, because having this certification under the name of the company is going to influence its stakeholders like investors, company employees, and the customers. So, leadership employment or leadership involvement will be enhanced, the reputation of company can be increased, attaining business like more business, more competitive and financial advantages over the competitors, like other companies manufacturing the same product, but maybe with poor environmental performance. So, there you get a edge over the existing companies. Then environmental performance is enhanced, and employee commitment can also be increased with the ISO 14001 certification. So, there is a difference between certification and accreditation. So, certification, it is basically a seal of approval from a accredited third party, which says that a company runs to according to one of the international standards. For whatever standard any company apply, the accredited third party which is certifying, that provides the certificate. So, basically certification is a provision by an independent body, mainly the certifying body, which gives a written assurance or a document called certificate, which says that the product, service or system meets specific requirements. Okay. And what is accreditation? It is the recognition by an independent body, generally known as a accreditation body. It accreditates or recommends the certifying body. That certifying body is operating according to the national and international standards. So, what does it mean? So, whenever any company wish to apply for ISO certificates, they should apply to a company which is accredited by a, like say, accredited body, by an independent body, which ensures whether the company that would provide certificate to the clients, they are working as per the national or international standards or not. So, when applying for ISO 14000 certificate, these are the 8 steps which are mentioned here to simplify, and it's some of them are similar to when what we studied, whether we require ISO certificate or not. So, the first step is understand the requirement of ISO 14001 standard. Then you develop a systematic audit plan, identify the gaps and strengthen the EMS, which means the self assessment, whatever exists in our company at present so far as environmental performance is concerned. We inspect that, assess it, and identify whether there are any gaps, there are any lacuna which needs to be addressed or which needs to be revamped. Then you do the stage 1 audit, stage 2 audit before implementation, and then acquire certification based on the results of audit. So, those 2 stage audit will give us results, and based on those results we can apply for certification. So, if there is a decision on certification, you do the surveillance audits and recertification audit. So, whatever compliance or improvement is ongoing, those needs to be monitored, and if there is a need for renewing the certificate for another cycle, that also can be taken into account after the monitoring and auditing stage. So, that is the like step by step process for applying for ISO 14001 certification. These are some of the examples ISO 14000 certificates of the companies in India. You can see this one is for SCL Technologies, and what does it say? So, it has it says that the company operates the complies with requirements of ISO 14001 2015 for the scope environmental activities covering the provision of IT services and supporting functions of SCL Technologies. So, SCL is a IT sector company, right, but if there are any environmental activities associated with that IT sector that has been managed by the EMS like implemented in that company, and that EMS is certified by BSI for ISO 14001 certification. So, that is the certificate of registration provided provided by BSI. So, BSI is a certifying body here, and BSI would be accredited by some other body like say ISO or some other international level or national level body like say Bureau of Energy Efficiency or CEA, which can certify BSI to provide certificates of ISO 14001. Then this is another example of Engineering Projects India Limited. So, here this is a construction based company. So, again the standard is same ISO 14001 2015, even though the sector of the company is different, you can see, and here the scope is design, procurement and implementation of multidisciplinary infrastructure, industrial and other construction projects. So, and any environmental impact or aspect associated with the activities related to infrastructure and construction projects, for that the required environmental management system exists in this company and is able to function as per the standards or the guidelines mentioned in the 14001, and that is why they have been given the certificate of registration. This is I think provided by again a third party, and this third party certifier should be accredited by a accreditation body. So, there would be several ISO 14001 certifying bodies or companies existing in India, but for accreditation there are not many bodies. There would be hardly 2 or 3 government based agencies which have that authority to provide that accreditation to a certifying agency. So, with this we come towards the end of the today's lecture, and to summarize we started with the ISO 14000 series of standards, like when it came into existence, what was the history, what are different types of standards affiliated with different aspects of the environment like labeling, auditing, LCA, EMS, and then we specifically focused on ISO 14001, looking at its elements and the approach, like how do we process, and the certification, how do we apply for ISO 14001 certification, what is the difference between certifying and accrediting body, followed by some example certificates of ISO 14001. So, with this we stop here. Thank you.